Well, we know with the Stanley Cup final and the NBA finals, kind of looks like it's almost fixing to be a dud. But every single one of us are absolutely 100% ready for football season, including college football, which is supposed to be pretty exciting this year, given the fact expanded playoffs and so much more. So joining us, of course, covering the Texas Longhorns and the Colorado Buffaloes. This should be an interesting season for both of these programs. And to explain about that, we've got our guest, Kevin Borba. So we're starting to now have an expanded playoffs. Hopefully there is no complaining about this because again, people think in Florida State, what a travesty. I probably wouldn't have used the term because Georgia, just gave you a 63 bomber. And so, I just think this year with how college football is really going to be set, it's bigger, it's better. We got a college football video game back. How do you kind of expect this season to be? Because I think it's going to be bigger and better than ever this year.
Yeah, I think this season is going to be full of surprises. I think it's still going to be full of complaints. There's only 12 teams in the playoff. So that means teams 13 through 15 are going to be the teams that are snubbed. So every team is going to feel like they should have been in the playoff in some capacity. But realistically, it's a very deep field. I wouldn't say there's a dominant program out there right now where it's that team is the clear-cut favorite. I would say there's teams like Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, who all have a case for being one of the best teams in college football. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it sort of plays itself out because a lot of these teams with conference realignment are going to end up playing each other anyway.
Yeah, and so you covered two programs, Colorado and Texas. Let's start with Texas because the year that they had with what Sark has put together, and they actually, I'm very happy that they produced a lot of really good prospects into the NFL draft, from Byron Murphy to Tavondre Sweat and Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy. This year, though, given the fact that this program is moving into a very tough SEC program and conference, there is a lot to really kind of handle up. You got a new regime in Alabama with Kalen DeBoer. You've got Georgia with Kirby Smart that he's running this conference for years. This seems like this is a much bigger task for Sark to have to handle after the year that they just came out of. So when evaluating this roster and evaluating what they picked up and left off from last year in the playoffs, how do you kind of see this competition going from what the Big 12 was into coming into what the SEC will potentially look like?
Yeah, in terms of the competition, I think you kind of alluded to it. The SEC, there's not going to be many weeks off. I think the one quote-unquote week off, and I hate to do it to them, is Vanderbilt. But other than that, they play a lot of challenging teams. They have Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Texas A&M. As it stands right now, there's, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams on their schedule that are ranked, and it wouldn't shock me if by the end of the year they play 7 or 8 teams that are ranked at one point. So it's going to be super deep. I imagine it'll be a little bit more difficult than the Big 12, but at the same time, they haven't been in a position to where they didn't have to worry about anyone. Even this past year, TCU took them down to the wire. They had some tough games down the stretch against Kansas State without Quinn Ewers and stuff like that. So I think the Big 12 deserves some props, but I also think Texas as a program is peaking at the right time.
Yeah, and so the thing that I like about it is because at least Sark really is building this program from the ground up and building it to its highest potential. When you start thinking about it, because I think last year I got a much better improved, I had a much better controlled Quinn Ewers at the quarterback position, because that was kind of the initial thought was, is this going to be a guy that's going to be a kind of a little wild, rowdy, erratic, at quarterback, or was he going to get it together? I thought last year was a really, really good look from Quinn Ewers. Now, I'm sure you broke this down as best as you possibly could, because not only with him, but the spring that we got from Arch Manning, which I know people are basically evaluating this. What is going to be the deal with quarterback? We know Quinn Ewers being back. This will be his last year in Texas before declaring for the NFL draft. I mean, covering Arch Manning, would you say he's the kind of prospect that either he's going to get too impatient and is looking for a starting job, or is Sark kind of giving him that feedback of, look, we want you a part of this program. We're building the program to its best potential. Is he that kind of patient prospect that's willing to have the best results?
Yeah, I think the best way to answer this question is I'm going to call Arch Manning weird, but not in a mean way. Like, he is a different recruit than what we see these days. He's not into NIL. He's not going to be in the upcoming college football video game that you mentioned in your intro. He's not going to be, he opted out. I think he's like the one person I've heard that opted out. He doesn't do NIL deals. The only NIL sort of thing that he did, he donated all the money to charity. He's a very low-key sort of dude who just is there to play football. And he went to Texas because he wants to play for Texas, and he went to Texas because he wants to play for Sark. And so as long as Sark's there, and as long as the university doesn't go under any sort of name change or brand change, he should be happy in Austin. I think realistically, he could have left this offseason if he wanted to. Like, he entered his name into the transfer portal, and schools like Ohio State, Alabama, whoever it may be, any school you could imagine probably would have reached out to him and been like, hey, come here and we'll figure out a way for you to start. But I think he wants to play at Texas, and he knows that barring anything catastrophic, he's going to be the starting quarterback for Texas come 2025. And realistically, and you don't want to wish this upon anyone, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but Quinn Ewers hasn't played a complete season of football since high school. I think even his final season of high school, he missed a few games due to injury. So Quinn Ewers kind of has that injury bug. So Arch Manning is always a snap away from playing, and I think it would be really interesting to see if Quinn Ewers went down with an injury and Arch Manning is tearing it up, like what happens then. That I don't want to speculate on, but that's something for another day. But that's where I think it could get a little dicey. But I think for now, he understands that his role right now is to be the backup and improve every day he can. And then when it's his turn, he's going to be ready.
Given the prospects that we have gotten from, the NFL draft, from defense to offense, this is going to be really interesting considering the fact that Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, and Jonathan Brooks all got drafted into the NFL. To kind of see a new look weaponry of what Texas has. I mean, is there anybody you kind of seen on this roster who really kind of caught your eyes that you may say could be bound for bigger leaps come this next season?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. They lost their three best receivers all to the NFL. They lost their tight end to the NFL and the running back, like you mentioned. And I still think that their offense is going to be one of the best in the country. They went out and landed three really good portal receivers. Isaiah Bond from Alabama is kind of the one that's the headliner. Silas Bolden from Oregon State, though, he's like 5'9", 5'8", probably a generous 5'8". And he's just a ball of electricity. And he's someone that is being reported as standing out already in the summer workouts. And so he's someone that could step in. They've got a couple 5-star wide receivers named like Ryan Wingo and Jonte Cook just waiting in the wings. So they have weapons all over the place. They have Amari Black from Alabama as well, who transferred in as a tight end. And so they have weapons everywhere. I think Sarkisian has kind of got this program to a spot where you could lose a bunch of talent, and you have guys who are just as talented, ready and waiting in the wings. Because realistically, I think losing guys like this 4 years ago would have been detrimental. But I think now, where the program's infrastructure is, they're fine.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the least, because again, I love Steve Sarkisian. I think that it was a long time coming to really kind of build the program organically as he wanted to. And now to just basically see, I mean, I've seen the worst in Texas ever since right after Vince Young and Colt McCoy and many, many others who have come from this program. But to see it finally rise to its full potential again really just makes me happy that, yes, we finally got Southern football to really look as good as it is right now.
Yeah.
So shifting from the South and going into a state that I live in Colorado, just 30 minutes from Denver, talking about, the Buffaloes, Colorado, I mean, there's a high expectancy rate. And I mean, the expectations are very high for Deion Sanders. Last year, my takeaway was this. It was an odd fit because it seemed like he walked in like he was a big brand type coach. I mean, that was kind of the vibe I looked at. And so to go to have an attitude from that perspective to come into a program that, look, they're just looking to get any and every way they can to start doubling their win totals. I mean, from what we got before. I think they moved the needle a little slowly in the right direction, but it wasn't hitting its full potential yet. So now that I look at them this year, considering they picked up a lot from the transfer portal, offensive line, offensive weapons, and also some defensive pieces. I mean, because the expectation level is so high on Deion Sanders, this has to be the year, from what narratives are saying. This has to be the year. There has to be big jumps of improvement to get Colorado to its full potential, right?
Yeah, that's a tough one because I think realistically, he has this brand, he has this persona where he's saying things like they want to make it to the playoff, which I don't think you'll find a coach in the country right now that if you ask them, hey, do you want to make it to the playoffs? I don't think a single one of them is going to say no. So I think people need to take what he says with a grain of salt. I genuinely do believe that he believes this team is a lot better, and it is a lot better. Last year's team, the offensive line was atrocious. The defensive line was very bad. The linebacker group, not so good. Like, they were just throwing out guys who had never really played before, who didn't have a lot of experience. They went to the portal this year, and they got a lot of talent, and they got a lot of experience, and I think that helps a lot. But in terms of what the expectations are, I would say a bowl game is kind of like the baseline. Like, I feel like if they make a bowl game, that should be considered a success. I know a lot of people are going to clown on them if and when they don't make the Big 12 championship or the playoff, but to go from 1-11 to 4-8 to say 6-6, 7-5, that's a pretty big improvement. You're in a Big 12 conference that has, I think ESPN's FPI had like 9 or 10 teams from the 17 to 35 range. So it's a very tricky conference. It's a very like anyone could beat anyone sort of conference. So Colorado may upset some people, and then they may lose a game where it's like, oh, I wasn't expecting Cincinnati to beat them, or I wasn't expecting Texas Tech to beat them. But I do think the roster is a lot better. It just comes down to how quickly they get off and if everyone's able to stay healthy.
Yeah, the games on the schedule that I've looked at, I mean, this is battle tested, I believe, in this kind of schedule, because like you mentioned, you got a Texas Tech, a Cincinnati on this, and even the games that I looked at that are kind of like, nah, are North Dakota State and of course their arch rival Colorado State. But when I get the Nebraskas and the Utahs and the Baylors and even Oklahoma State and Kansas, yeah. I mean, those are the kinds that those are teams that can push around, especially when I face that Utah defense that really just knows how to play well when it comes to shutdown and getting pressure in the quarterback's face. I mean, this is the kind of thing you got to be able to work your side of the ball, but then you also have to shut down on defense, because I think that was the big problem last year, right? They would put points up, but then immediately would then just start coughing it up, and then the deficits, the whole table's changed after that.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think the defense this year, it's much improved. Like, they have a guy like BJ Green, who was a second team all Pac-12 guy, had 6 sacks last year. They couldn't get pressure on the quarterbacks. They couldn't really stop the run. I think realistically, and it was kind of like a negative view, but when they beat TCU, the very first game of the season last year, I said on my show, and this was like right after the win, it was like a huge win. It was very exciting. I was like, had TCU decided to just run the ball, they would have won the game. Because they kept trying to test Colorado with Chandler Morris, and they kept trying to get cute in the passing game and test Travis Hunter, and it just wasn't working out. And so they should be able to they need to be able to stop the run, generate pressure, and they need a better secondary. And I feel like they checked all those boxes. It's just a matter of it all coming together. And then also there's a lot of pressure on Robert Livingston, their new defensive coordinator. Had 12 years in the NFL, no coordinating experience though. So he kind of has to grow up quickly as a coach.
So it's going to be interesting because, given a lot of the outlooks that I believe for next year's NFL draft, there's 2 of them obviously in mind, and you know who I'm talking about, Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. I would say Travis Hunter is just built differently. The fact that he could be a receiver and he could basically play a corner. but I think he'll come into this league basically drafted as a receiver. When you look at just the play style and just the way that he attacks, whether he's contested on a lot of plays or he's got to go, he's got to make a play to get first downs and scores for Buffalo. When evaluating the style and the production of Travis Hunter, is this kind of now the pivoting point where this is the massive leap to really build up his draft stock?
Honestly, I think Travis Hunter is one of those special talents where, and I would never expect anyone to do this. I'd never advise anyone to do this. He could sit out right now and probably be a top 10 pick or a top 15 pick if he wanted to. I think of like Jadeveon Clowney when he's at South Carolina. Obviously, he didn't pan out as the pro we all thought he would be, but he's someone, Zion Williamson at Duke, where they have such an aura around them. They have such a like electricity to them and talent where people know that they're going to be good. Like Travis Hunter, realistically, I think the only thing he could do to his draft stock is maybe go up a couple spots because I don't think we're going to see a corner or a receiver. However, whatever he's drafted as, I don't think we're going to see either one of those guys be taken out at the one spot. But he could be a top 5 pick depending on the teams that are up there. So I think realistically, he just needs to show he can stay healthy. He could continue to improve on the defensive side of the ball. He had a couple bad games last year. One of them was a Stanford game. Obviously, he was returning from injury, but I think he just needs to stay consistent, which is pretty much what he does every week. It's just if he has a bad game on defense, if you look at his offensive stats, he probably has 120 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. So he's just someone that I think he's a lock for a first-round pick.
So when I looked at, I mean, the NFL got blessed with multiple, I'd say about 9-10 quarterbacks that, came into the league where there's about 5 to 6 of them that are ready to play. And then some of them that I think are, draft and develop type players that could eventually become starters come, down the road, whether it is this year or it could be next year, however that they work the plan. So when I look at the outlook for next year with quarterbacks, considering the fact that you've got Carson Beck, you've got Quinn Ewers, and then there's Shedeur Sanders. I'd say Shedeur, what he kind of gives me from what I watched on film, there's some elusiveness. He can run out the pocket and open up space, and he does have a very accurate arm. But I could also make the argument that I think there is a part of him, and I'd say he does humble himself in the moment when he knows it's a tougher kind of, fight in the game, and he's got to be able to give it his all and face those adversities on the field. So I think last year from what we got, they did end up getting more wins on their win totals, but this year, given everything that they've gone through, I think Shedeur is ready to make that leap in the next level, considering the fact that there is a lot on the line for this program, right?
Yeah, I would say his biggest flaw and the biggest thing he needs to work on is how long he holds onto the football. And if he can sort of either decide to run or decide, you know what, the play is broken down and no one's getting open and I don't have an avenue to run and just take the check down or throw it away, I think he is easily the best quarterback prospect or one of the best quarterback prospects in this class. I think that was like the only knock on him last year. He's really smart with the ball, doesn't make bad throws, doesn't really force the issue. And so I wouldn't say there's like a major jump for him to take because I feel like he's pretty consistent. He's pretty like electric and great as it is. But if he could just not hold on to the football, I think he was either the longest or one of the longest holds on to the ball one of the longest times in all of college football. And that's just not something you could have, especially with the offensive line like he did last year. But when he gets to the league, he's going to have a better offensive line or depending on what team he goes to, you would assume. But he just needs to sort of put everything together, go through his reads. I think everything is setting him up to have an even bigger year. He has an offensive scheme that he likes better than last year. He has a wide receiver group that is probably one of the 5 best in the country. And so he has all the tools personally and all the tools around him to really explode and push for that number 1 spot if possible.
So finally, given that we've heard the comments from Deion Sanders when he basically expressed about the NIL and the transfer portal and like just because it's such a new age in college football now, I mean, this was the kind of thing that kind of forced Nick Saban to retire. He could not figure this out. So, but again, he goes down as one of the legendary college coaches I think we've ever seen in our lifetime. But when given and taken, I mean, from covering both Steve Sarkisian and Deion Sanders, I mean, this new era with the NIL and the transfer portal, a lot of coaches, especially, I mean, Kalen DeBoer comes out from Washington, goes into Alabama, and he gains some and then all of a sudden lose some. So a lot of the coaches are coming through this wave of a lot of these players that, one, they want to get paid, two, they want to basically guarantee a starting job, but they want to be able, some of these coaches, they're more about organic build. It's like, no, forget the money. Forget this for a second. I want to build the best potential out of you. Even if that means I got to hit you hard to where you can callous that in your mind and in your body to where you are ready for the next level. So I'd say, in my opinion, with the way they managed the transfer portal, I would say leave the transfer portal like an off season. Make sure all the bowl games, everything is done before I got to worry about this transfer. Because I thought this past season, that was a lot for a lot of programs and for a lot of coaches, right?
Yeah, I think not the academic calendar, the college football calendar is like the biggest problem the sport has right now, which is saying a lot considering there's a lot of weird things happening with NIL. We have a lawsuit going on in Gainesville. We have a lot of weird things with guys being contacted without even being in the portal. There's a lot of issues that college football has, but I don't think there's any bigger than the calendar. I think it's just really, it puts coaches in a weird spot where they have to recruit high school recruits. They have to try to keep their team together. And then, oh, you're also getting punished for playing a bowl game, or for some teams, you're getting punished for making it to the college football playoff. And we saw it with Texas. Like Malik Murphy was he was having to figure out his future. What is the best situation for him while also trying to be a part of a team that's trying to win a title. Like, it's a really weird predicament. And you would think it's an easy fix, but clearly the NCAA or the powers that be don't see it that way. But yeah, I think the calendar needs a bit of an adjustment. Let the season finish out. Let their recruiting classes be signed. Let the bowl games finish, and then have the portal open. I don't think we need all that happening at once. I think I just feel like it's too chaotic and not in a good way.
I'd say, too, elaborating up on that, what I would also hope that college football really gets right, you got to get a CEO in this thing, because there needs to be some structure and some consistency in this. Because I think because the NIL is such a popular thing, it's starting to grow, it's starting to become big, and thank God Reggie Bush got his Heisman Trophy back, because, yeah, that would have posed a lot of question marks. How could he have held this trophy for so long? But you put that. But my other biggest thing is, too, to even kind of elaborate on it, is, look, I love the fact that we're getting expanded playoffs. I also love the fact that we're going through shifts. Now, I felt like, I can't believe the Pac-12 couldn't find a television provider that could have gotten all these programs, considering a lot of these top quarterbacks came from the Pac-12, which was just like, enjoy the moment while it lasts, because now it's dead and gone like that quickly. And now they're starting to move to other conferences and expanding upon it. So I would think, too, this also helps to evenly balance the competition from every program, because when I look at this, I mean, I'm going to get Texas playing Georgia. I'm going to get Texas playing South Carolina. I'm going to get Colorado playing Utah, and a lot of these other teams in those conferences. I expect this to be full maximum competition, because the last thing I want, like I've been seeing for years, was when Alabama would be playing like Roast Beef Tech or Panera Bread, University. And it's like, what is it with these cupcake games? Like, it just does no good. And then all of a sudden you have this controversy of who's getting into the college football playoffs. So I think this should initiate this, but I think we got to have a CEO for this to kind of structurize it, right?
Yeah, I do think someone needs to oversee college football. I think the perfect person, and I would say he joked about it maybe, was Nick Saban. He retired, stepped away. Obviously, he's working with ESPN now, or he will be. But college football has outgrown the parameters that we grew up knowing it with. There's now athletes being paid as much as I would say like the lower level I don't think there's guys getting like tens of millions of dollars, but there's guys getting a couple million here and there. Like there's a lot of athletes making money. The brands are as big as they ever are. Social media reach is astronomical. And so I think it's just kind of outgrown what we currently know it as. And we're kind of seeing all those issues every offseason. And there's going to be a lot of growing pains. There's going to be a lot of weird instances as the sport continues to kind of have a self-correction. But yeah, I think someone needs to oversee it. It has to be someone who's willing to understand that money is a priority, but also I would say preserving the traditions of the sport, because I think money's kind of outweighing the traditions, and traditions are kind of being forgotten. And I think that's kind of the part that sucks about this. You mentioned the Pac-12. That was my first job out of college, was with the Pac-12 network, and
Mhm.
now hundreds, thousands of people are like out of jobs because the Pac-12 was unable to put together a deal, and it sucks because obviously it was a great conference and it didn't work out. But I think there's just a lot of changes happening, and I think there's too many. And obviously, the way we're going right now just isn't sustainable.
Yeah, and hopefully we can get this right because, again, college football just has such a grand atmosphere than what we get with the NFL. Because, I mean, when you go into college towns, when you go to Gainesville, when you go to Ann Arbor, and you go to a lot of these big time stadiums, everybody just welcomes you in to those stadiums, especially when you're in the tailgate. You got everybody that's close to the campus that are fully invested with their university. And so hopefully they can figure this out and we can get this right, because I'm just seeing this thing explode. And I'm like, somebody's got to gain control to keep the momentum and the consistency rolling in the right way. A fun question before letting you go, because I know next month we got college football 25 coming out, and we know that that's going to be a big thing because you and I have been waiting for years for this thing. They've been teasing us for several years, saying it's coming back, and now they've stuck to their word. It's finally coming back next month. How do you kind of anticipate this thing going? Because honestly, there's a lot of new additives here, and I know too there's been players who have signed off with their NIL deal to be in the video game, and some that have not. How do you kind of see this kind of working out a little bit more in the financial and even in the popularity side of things?
Yeah, popularity wise, which I'm not like a video game expert, but I imagine this has the potential to be like the most popular sports video game in America. I don't think college football is as worldwide as we would like to think it is, but I would say it's probably going to be one of the best or one of the most popular sports video games in America, possibly of all time. I think realistically, the thing I'm most interested in seeing is players learning their ratings,
Mhm.
because it's going to have their name on it. Like if I was in the game, it would say Kevin Borba rating. I'd probably be at like a solid 55. Like I, I'm not very big. I'm not very fast. Not the strongest, but I don't think
As a redshirt freshman,
as a
you
redshirt,
know.
yeah, like I think a lot of people are going to be a little butthurt about their ratings.
Mhm. Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting because again, I think that, to me personally, I feel like that may be motivation, especially if you're a redshirt freshman coming into the program. That
Yeah,
should hype you up to get you more up into practice, more up into OTs,
yeah,
and
for sure.
even get you some playing time, right?
Yeah, yeah, it'll be a little extra. I feel like there's gonna be some added juice. I also think it's gonna hurt some feelings. I also think there's gonna be a lot of, I guess, there's gonna be growing pains with the game as well. I think realistically, from just like the game perspective, there's changes. Like we know there's not gonna be like the high school aspect of the road to glory, and so I think a lot of which this new generation, and I'm gonna sound really old as a 24-year-old right now. All these like middle school kids, they don't remember the game how me and you remember it. So to them,
Yeah.
this is their first edition. So like this is they're not going to know any different. But for older guys like older gentlemen like us, we kind of have to understand that the game's going to be different. We have to understand it's not going to be the exact same, but it should still be a blast. It should still be really fun. I think 10 years, I think, is what it was since the last game. I think that's
Mhm.
way too long of a time. And I think it's going to reunite a lot of people with the gaming consoles. I've already had like 5 friends tell me, hey, I'm getting a PS5 or an Xbox just for this game. So it's going to be really fun. I imagine people are going to enjoy playing it. Players are going to enjoy playing it. They're going to probably be a little offended about their ratings, but it's just going to be a really awesome experience to kind of just show why the college football community is so in tune and so fun.
Good Lord. We got to be the pioneers to really pave the way because, I mean, I'm 29 and the last time I played was 2013 of college football. And I thought it was great because of the legacy and the dynasties, like that was always the fun part that I played. And even when I loved playing 2006, I mean, the fact that you can get the hit stick, you can get the crowd control, something like that. I mean, you got to bring the classics back. It's only what's going to make it easier to pave the way for the younger generation of gamers out there and those that are not well educated in college football, that now they will start to be and start to learn these players, start to really kind of understand the aspect. And even if it's like, if the stadium atmosphere is like this, I got to go down there then. I could only imagine what the attendance will be like. I mean, because again, I'm planning on it, and I would plan to go down to Boulder myself to go and see the stadium and get a good long look of what Deion's doing on the field and see exactly, how the Buffaloes will be this year. But I think it's going to be, a great change. It's one that was long overdue, but hopefully it really does impress and succeeds in the biggest way possible for every single one of us that had played NCAA football for years and years. But Kevin, appreciate you, man. Where can people find you for covering everything, even on those Buffaloes and Longhorns?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter or X, as it's called now, at Kevin_Borba. I'm covering all things college football. I also cover a little bit of breaking news and trending news for Athlon as well. So I'll be writing about the WNBA and everything in between. If you like sports, I probably write about it in some capacity. So go check me out. I always tell people you're free to comment. If you disagree or agree, just make sure it's not too long. Otherwise, I won't read it.
Well, I've got at least a trusty source right there. So hopefully when I look at these articles, I'm like, these are definitely some nuggets for me to come up here up onto the show and explain about it. So
for sure,
appreciate you, man. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. We know it's going to be Father's Day weekend as well. It's going to be a lot of fun for everybody. So I also hope for a very great Father's Day for all those fathers up out there. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. I mean, out here in Colorado, it's Parker Days, so we're getting crazy and getting busy up out here in the Denver area. So everybody be careful out there. Have a safe weekend, but enjoy yourself, man. Appreciate you coming up on here, and we will see exactly what the college football season will look like, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem. Yeah, it's going to be interesting for college football indeed, but I'm excited for what the new season is going to look like. College football, the college football video game, everything is going to be just absolutely outstanding. Cannot wait for it.